Hello everyone and welcome back to aetutsplus.com. Once again, this is Gottfried Karl Heinrich Hofmann from Raubko Pictures speaking, and this is our fifth installment of the Blender 2.5 Smoke Simulation Introduction Series, and the third part that's dealing specifically with a high-resolution setup. And let me shortly introduce to you what has been achieved up until now. We found a pretty decent style for smoke simulation, and we also found out that the capabilities of the host computer are even better than we thought, but we also noticed that the highest possible resolution wasn't the best one for our smoke simulation, but we wanted to have the style that could be achieved by a simulation with only 4 and not the maximum of 5 divisions in this case. And the point where we left off the last time was the setup of the camera animation. I had told you that I would bake the entire scene in low resolution once again, and well, low resolution in this case means the lowest possible value in the high resolution, because we definitely need the high-res feature for the fire simulation. But we don't want to go up to the desired level of 4 right now, but rather use the smaller number of divisions, because now we want to set up our camera, and to do this, it will be an animation at the end. We need a rather responsive system. And currently, as you can see, things are not as responsive as they should or could be when scrubbing through the timeline. There's a considerable amount of stuttering, and well, that's because of the cache. Let me shortly show how the cache files are currently looking. Here we got the high-res cache. Say, let's check out how on frame, let's say a frame 169, that's right in the middle. How much megabyte does a high-res cache part take? Oh, and it's 28.5 megabytes, and now let's add the low one too, because our system consists of a low and a high-res part, and it always needs both. And yeah, the low one is also around 23.4, so all in all more than 50 megabytes per frame. Our simulation needs to read from disk. And that's what's making the system currently a little unresponsive. Because, yeah, all you know, hard drives are way slower when it comes to access time and when it comes to the number of gigabytes you can read per second compared to, say, RAM, for example. And you might get a grasp of how this would be if these, not the low one, the iris one would not be just 26 megabytes, but say a gigabyte. That would be one hell of a trouble for our system, and things would be at the brink of freezing. So we need the low-res simulation once again for this part. Even this means a longer baking time, because we had to bake this all in low resolution, which took quite a while, and later on we'll have to rebake it in high res. For the setup of the camera, we only need about the size of our flame and not the exact look, so it's fine, and we can have a responsive system or semi-responsive system that at least gives us the possibility to, we can work on this, and that's what we need. So let's get things started. I used a path to animate the camera and not direct keyframes, because this gives us a lot more control over the movement of the camera and a more smoother and more 3D look compared to the keyframe or normal keyframe approach. So yeah, let's get things started by hitting Shift A and adding a curve path. Oh, it's up there. Now let's select it, hit G, and we'll go down here because this is where our camera will take the start. Now I've hit Tab to go into edit mode, hit Alt to deselect everything we had selected before, and now I hit the right mouse button and grab these points on the curve, and this is the end point, so I'll put it right about where our camera is currently residing, and all the others I'll adapt to this. Yeah, just select them and hit G, and you'll see that these are control points to a Bezier curve. And all those who are familiar with Bezier curves know how those control points are working. You just have to grab it, and it will have an influence on the real curve, but the real curve usually won't touch it, but be a little farther away. So think of it like a spring that drags the curve along. So yeah, I guess this might be quite a cool path. Maybe refine it a little. Yeah, it's just about right. We don't want things to be perfect because the smoke is our feature and not so much the path animation. But nevertheless, I'll hit Tab once again. Now I'm back in object mode, and here you can see the nice curved path. And now let's yeah, everything is set up alright. This is here the object data of our path. Now let's set up the camera to move on this path. First thing we need to do is to hit Alt and G, clear the location, because the path here is relative to the global location of the camera. And now let's click here onto Object Constraints and add a constraint, and it's follow path. Let the target be the curve, and now we see the camera is on the curve and nicely moving along. But there's one little problem, and that's that we need the camera we wanted to face the flame, because currently, see, this kind of movement is absolutely not what we want. And of course, you could animate this too with keyframes, but once again go the easier way that has a lot more control. And what I'm going to do is I'm adding another constraint to the camera, and that's a track to constraint. Track to means that your object tracks another object, or let's say an orientation of your object tracks another object. And to get things right, the best thing to use is an empty. So I'll add an empty, I'll give it a name, like say track to empty, and then I'll select the camera once again, add another constraint, and this here is track 2. Here it is. Yeah, then the target will be the track 2 empty, and yeah, something has changed. And let's see, here it somewhat is facing the empty, but not the way we want it. And what's wrong? Yeah, we need to set up things a little. Here in the track 2 panel, we have an option for the axis of our object that's tracking the other object. And to find out which axis on our camera is the right one, for that we need to switch the view of the axis to local. Now we can see here the local axis of our camera. Well, I rotate the view a little, and now you see the blue one is the Z axis, the green one the Y and the red one the X. And we see that our camera currently faces downward and the Z-axis faces upward. So the right axis is the opposite of the Z-axis. That's minus Z here, and let's check it. And yeah, it's a little better, but we need to check something different because this is currently not really working out, because our camera also has an orientation upwards, and that's in case here green, Y. So we need to change the upward direction to the Y-axis, and now we've got a pretty decent following of our empty. Let's say check the view through the camera view, and now, yeah, this is our currently our camera animation, and of course it needs some refinement. Well, first thing that's really cool about this setup is that we can drag the empty, hit G and drag it, and now we actually can rotate our camera. Pretty cool, and it will always follow the empty. So let's go up here maybe, and now the, yeah, it's a little bit better, but it's a little bit from the bottom, and actually I wanted at the end to be right at the center of our Z-axis, but well, I'll do this later on because there's something else about our path that's currently not right, and that's, you see, it stops at frame 100, but in the original animation I posted it stopped at right where the emitter rotated and the flames were shooting towards the camera, so that is actually frame 200. And we can easily change this by selecting our path, go to the properties of the path, and down here there is, we don't need this and this, down here there is the path animation setting. And this actually says how many frames will the animation have, and in our case we need 200. And now, see, our camera is, yeah, it's moving on the path nicely along, tracking our empty, and at the end it's right there. Well, maybe we need a few more, let's say, so that in the end it's gonna, yeah, I think it's a lot more dynamic if we let this end on frame 230. Okay. By the way, this value here down here means where are we currently, and the one on top says how long is the animation basically. So now let's move to front view and change the points on the curve a little. So I'm gonna hit tab again to be go back in the edit mode, A, and now I'm gonna move just as I did before. I'm gonna move the points around, and I think let's start a little at the top of the flame, and then let's also end this right where the C is, global C is 0. That's actually 0 on the red line of the x-axis, and the other points of course all should be a little bit above that axis. So let's move this one up and this one up, and this one might need to be taken down a little. So yeah, right, about right. It's a nice curve. Let's see how it's looking from camera perspective, because maybe we need to change a little bit. Whoa, pretty cool, right? With the flame shooting about here, and it's already quite nicely and then at the end, whoosh. But yeah, the end is not so cool because it's the bright spot that's gonna be here. It's too far on the right, and we want to have the logo somewhat more towards the rule of thirds, and that's way too much outside. So let me see. The last keyframe was on 230, right? So let's move the empty, select it with a right click. Something's wrong. Back into object mode, right? Move the empty a little bit. Yeah, so no, that's about right. And I'm gonna insert a keyframe because I'll need to animate things later on. So now we got a keyframe for our empty, and now let's get up here. That's a pretty cool position, but I want this to be a bit more extreme, so let's move the empty once again. Move it around that it's somewhat like here. Now insert, location, and now let's see how things are going here, right? Woo. It's always inside, and we have a quite nicely going flame. Maybe it's a little bit too centered, especially in the end. But let's just do it this way. Not too much tweaking because we just don't have the time for this. Now let's do a test render, because maybe we need to get a little more towards the fire if you want to have a really, really cool effect, like the fire is going directly into the camera. Well, let's see. And this part, I guess this one will nearly completely disappear unless we change the texture, but I think it's pretty cool. Maybe I'll work on that later on. And yeah, things are pretty decent, right? And let's see how the bright spot is looking, because that's the one there where we want to have our logo later on. Yeah, I guess, yeah, it's always gonna be a little bit upwards, but I guess there will be enough room for our logo, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, I guess this is set up perfectly, and now the next step would be to, after we've set this up, so let's save, and the next step would be to push the number of high-res divisions up a little. I'll use 4 in this case, and then we're gonna meet back in the compositor. So here we are again. I set up a pre-baked file earlier. It's got a few different dimensions of the domain, but the style part of the domain is the same, and the file setup is also the same, so it should look pretty close. Also a different camera path and everything, but that's what you gotta do when you want to go on with the tutorial. Actually, the number of divisions is also the same. And now let's see what things. Oh, yeah, this is what I meant by unresponsive. Look, I'm scrubbing the timeline, and it takes ages until it reacts. This is insane. You could have worked on the camera path at this responsiveness, but it would have really, really, really painful, and it would have taken a long time. So it really made more sense to do a proxy bake at a lower resolution and do the final resolution bake at the very end, just before the compositing. And yeah, the reason for this is the size of the high resolution bakes now. See, I've got here this file and I check it out, and it's more than 500 megabytes in size. And so Blender now has to read more than 500 megabytes from disk for each frame, and that of course is very slow. So now let's go to the compositor and do the final brush ups. Let's do a render first, because we need this before we can work with the compositor. And I am rendering at half the resolution because later on in the compositor setup we'll have the render in the background, and this really will you won't see the entire picture, so it doesn't make sense to render it full size when you have to resize it anyway. So let's go with the smaller resolution, which is also faster. Now switch to the compositor by up here in the window setups, compositing, and yeah, then let's use the backdrop, and let's add a viewer node to see something inside the backdrop. I won't go into the details of the compositor, and this is also not an introduction to the Blender compositor if you're unfamiliar with this. There are very lots of tutorials that introduce you to the compositor and about how to work with nodes and everything. So yeah, I'd say better search the web about a cool introduction to the compositor, and I'll do here just I'll just composite, because these are just some final brush ups we're gonna do. First, let's add a RGB curves node to touch up the look of the fire a little bit. You could do the very same thing by changing the texture, but this would mean each time you change the texture you would need to re-render, while when doing this here, using this here, you can change the look of the fire without needing the need to re-render each time, which is pretty neat. So let's see here. What can we do? We can get a little more details from the certain flame parts, and let's a little bit more reddish. Yeah. Now we got a pretty stylized, nice flame. See what it looked before, and after. Very much stylized, and we got a little more details from our flames. Maybe this is a little too harsh here. Yeah, let's make the changes a little more subtle. Now the next thing I'm gonna add is a glow effect, because the flame currently has a pitch black background, which means it's in a dark environment, and whenever you got fire in a dark environment, you see a glow around it. No matter whether you look directly at it or through a camera, there will be a glow. And you won't see the glow when you're in a very bright environment, say a desert or a bright summer day at high noon. There won't be a glow around any fire you see, but once it gets dark, there will be a glow. So remember, dark environment, dark background, add a glow to your fire, and bright environment, bright background, don't add the glow. So there are a couple of ways to add that glow to your file, to your setups in Blender, and the one I usually use is by creating a blurred version of the original image. So I choose filter blur as a node, and then recombine it with the original one. So let's just do exactly this. Add the image to the blur node and the output to the viewer. And now let's choose a Gaussian blur, which is the best looking in my opinion. And let's make it 16 by 16. See, this will be the glow around our fire. Now let's add a color mix node and mix those two back together. The original one to the top, the blurred one to the bottom, output here. And this is already pretty glowy, but the best way to use this is not to use mix, but screen, which will help preserve all the original colors and details, but also add the glow around it. And with the FAC value, you practically can change how much, how strong the glow should be. I'll go with a value of 0.4. And now also connect this to the final composite and see how things are gonna look once we render. Because we might run into the problem, but I hope we are not gonna run into those problems at the current state. Well, by the way, you can use the blur node to blur out unwanted detail in your flame. Here, for example, yeah, see how it's vanished a bit, and we could have used, actually we should have tried to use the flame that had the divisions of 5, that was really high res, where there was much too much fine-grained detail we didn't want. Maybe the blur node, or maybe blurring it out, might have helped. We don't know, so yeah, we just won't know. Not in this tutorial. But yeah, that's also already looking pretty decent. Now let's go back to the default view. Go to camera and check the part where the flame is coming towards the camera and burning things, because I want to show you how I set up the logo revealer. So around 300 particles will stop and the flame will start to dissolve. So we need to check a frame a little before that. Yeah, we're here about right. Let's check 269. That will mean 4 frames for the logo to appear somewhere where the flame is extremely bright. So we need to do a render at first, and then we can go into the compositor. Let's render this one at full size. Render image. This will take a little longer, but I've prepared a file for the compositing of the logo, so yeah, we'll just have to wait. But let's look how everything is going. See, actually at the end a higher resolution might have been better, because when the fire is very, very near to the camera, you still see things like the cells and everything. So we still got artifacts here because it's not detailed enough, even though it was detailed enough from a point where we were farther away. So actually this is also a reason why we should have looked into working on the high-res version a little, because one with the 5 divisions, I'm pretty sure that one wouldn't have all those artifacts here. But nevertheless, now we're stuck, and this here is a little blue spot, and let me tell you where this comes from. Let's go back to the compositor, and here we got this bright blue spot, and that's because the FAC value here for this green one is too high. So yeah, perfect. And now let's add an input image. And we're gonna open up this picture I've created, which we're gonna composite into it. And practically this is a black background with the CG Taskbar logo at about the spot where we got our bright spot here. And so let's integrate it. We want the fire to be on top, so we need to add a color alpha over node with the image being at the top and the fire being at the bottom for some reason. And putting this here, and this here will yield in a very nice result. See, it's behind the fire. Now let's change the position a little. We can do this by add, distort, translate, which practically means change the position. And let's move it in -x because that's towards the left. And it's nearly vanished. Still a little bit, and now it's coming from this side, but we can still go better. And now it's very subtle, and no one will notice that this is popping up with all the action and noise going around it. But well, we don't want to see it in any frame before the frame we are currently at. So before frame 306 or where we're at. So we need to animate it so that it pops up. And we can do this very easily by adding an input node with just RGB and put it to black. This will just input a black image, no matter which size. And add another alpha over node, which is a little cheat because we don't have any image with an alpha value, but it works pretty decent. Connect them and connect this up here. And now let's change the FAC value a little, which means how strong is the bottom one versus the top one. And let's see, here we see our CG Taskbar logo. And now let's see what's happening when we're changing the FAC value here. And it's getting away. So let's go one frame to the left in the animation. Let's change it back to default. Let's go to frame 295. Damn, this will take ages once again. Fortunately, we're just doing some pretty simple compositing work. Oh yeah, so 295. Let's go to the compositing and hit I to insert a keyframe for the FAC value. That's pretty cool. You can animate things in the compositor. And then, hit. Actually, we just could have hit the right on the keyboard, but I like this better when things are so unresponsive. You might run into a wrong frame number, and this way you always see, yeah, we are at frame 296. And changing back to compositing, we've gotta hit I once again. And yeah, change it to 1 first. Now let's hit I. And here, this value, let's put it back to 1. And now, yeah, our animation is basically finished. This will look pretty cool, as you've seen from the preview. So thanks for watching this rather big series, but we've also created a very big thing, and well, maybe, but only maybe, there will be a few other tutorials on the Blender 2.5 smoke simulation. So I guess we'll hear or see each other again. Bye.